that's a Coonagh plane. Not what type of plane, it was a Coonagh plane.
Limerick Flying Club roots lie actually in the history of the airfield. There was a gentleman called Arthur Toppin who was a local businessman, and he bought this as a farm in the 1940s, and the company that was here then was Shannon Flying Services.
So I learned to fly with Shannon Flying Services, and I went solo and I got my licence with them. Then Shannon Flying Services, what happened was they became Air Ireland, and the chief flying instructor was here, went off to fly with Air Ireland.
So they left here and, if you like, abandoned us in that sense that there was no flying anymore. So that really bothered us. So myself, Brendan Beegan, and a friend called Brian Carpenter, unfortunately, who's passed away. We were all flying at the time, so we decided to start again, if you like, if that's the right word, and we formed the Limerick Flying Club.
So we had no aircraft here. We had one of the aircraft for a while and we used to fly that, but then
we approached the Munster Flying Club in Cork, and they agreed to send an aircraft here at least about 2 days a week, and if the interest was strong enough, they would maybe increase that.
So we decided to buy an aircraft, and we had no money, but three of us decided to buy an aircraft, and we approached Iona Airways up in Dublin, Pierce Cattle, and we bought the first club aircraft off him, Echo India Alpha Oscar Oscar, and that came into Coonagh in 1970.
I had the dubious honour of paying £2 for the very, very, very first membership card of the Limerick Flying Club.
So we were the initial founders of the club, and we've been members of the club ever since. We bought what we called a rally aircraft, or a French aircraft, and we bought one or two of those. Eventually we ended up flying rallies for 30 years. They're 2 seats side by side, and you could nearly land them vertically, you could nearly drop them onto the ground and they'd still survive.
And eventually we had to move them on because they were getting old, parts were getting hard to get, very expensive. It was decided to buy what we have now. They're called Technims. They're Italian, and two of the guys went over and showed all the way back here, and subsequently now we have 3 of them, and if I say so myself, they're fabulous aircraft, and they're much more fuel efficient and engine efficient than was we had. So hanging on to your old aircraft might sound a good idea because it's cheap, but it isn't cheap at the end of the day.
Very popular training aircraft, and growing in popularity, though we are the only club in Ireland operating them. Then the other 10 aircraft, or the other 7 aircraft here, are owned by groups of members, 2, 3, 4 members club together and buy an airplane.
The runway is brilliant in that it's tarmac. So many airfields in private aviation are grass, and that means so many of them get wet, get boggy. You have to be very, very careful. Some of them are very well maintained, some of them are appalling.
The shortest paved or hard surface runway in Ireland here in Coonagh, 2,416 metres long and 9 metres wide.
It was actually, when I started here, it was only 350 metres, but we extended it, and it's quite narrow.
And it tends to put some flyers off because they're operating, let's say, from a long field, wide field. But we're so used to it that our biggest problem is when we fly down to Shannon or somewhere, Cork or something, what to do with ourselves when we see this vast concrete runway, my God, where do I put this thing down, kind of thing.
But if you can land here, you can land anywhere. My interest in aviation was brought along by my dad and my grandfather, who used to regularly take me to Shannon on a Sunday afternoon. And my uncle, that's my dad's brother, was in the Royal Air Force. He was a navigator with their coastal command based in Ballykelly in Northern Ireland. And so we used to holiday up there, and we used to be taken onto the airbase. So airplanes have been in my life since almost day one, and fascination.
What got me interested in flying was building model aircraft and watching aircraft fly over, and I used to go to Shannon to watch the aircraft.
My first flight was actually here in April of '71 with a guy who was the chief flying instructor at the time, called Hayden Lawford, and it was a trip my dad organised for myself and my brother, that April, and 15-minute flight in a tailwheel airplane here, and I came down and I was absolutely buzzing, and I broke my parents' hearts until my 17th birthday, the following Christmas, and it was my first flying lesson, and my membership was my birthday present for my 17th birthday.
I was interested in aircraft. I used to go to Shannon, and then I found out there was a company operating here. So I came along here to Coonagh, and I started flying in 1967. I think it was £3 an hour, £3 10 shillings an hour to fly. So I used to come out and do a half an hour, so that was £1, whatever it was.
My late father, worked in Shannon on the ground with airlines, so I was out there from the age of about 4. So soon I'd be watching these all the time. So eventually came out here, tried to summon up the courage of coming in, and that was in the days of the Shannon Flying Services. And I came in and took my first lesson then. I think I was about 17, 18.
When I did my first solo, I got my driving license the same week.
It's fantastic for the student, and it's fantastic for the instructor if you've brought someone from walking in the gate to send them off solo. But it is actually nerve-wracking just to make sure that they get back on the ground, because I always say the students have one ambition in life, and that's to kill the instructor, you know.
You're told that if it's not right, you overshoot and you do it again. You don't want to do that because you feel you're making an ass of yourself, but it's actually the right thing to do.
The solo flight was terrifying, but you get used to it after that.
It's everybody learning to fly. The guys that are flying the big jets and so on, everybody talks about that day. You never forget it. You never forget it. It's always there. Elation would be the word. Absolute elation. Euphoric almost. Yeah.
It is a huge experience, and it's only later when I was instructing that it's a big responsibility on the instructor too, to have confidence in someone. Anytime you send someone solo for the first time, you're outside and you're walking up and down. If I smoked, I'd be smoking. There was a big occasion whenever that happened, you know, because the student always came along. If they knew they were going to go solo, they'd come along in an old shirt or an old tie.
Back in those days, we all wore ties. A lot of the lads today wouldn't even know what a tie is unless they were going to a wedding or sadly a funeral.
It was later on when we formed the club that we introduced the shirt, or I think it was bras as well they collected, you know, so it was ties, collar of a shirt or whatever they could get.
They say that it came out from the military, and the loose thing was that you were cutting the ties of, you know, from your instructor. In other words, you were like branching out like away from home. You're leaving the parents and you're leaving the guy or whoever, and you were now heading out on your own. So I believe that's where it came from.
I still happen to have my part of the tie, and I was wearing this after college, and it just got removed with a penknife, and the other half hung here for years, and somebody threw them all out. Unfortunately, there were dozens of them hanging up there, but that was part of the ritual. We've
attracted quite a lot of young people. For a number of years there, back in the 80s, we went downhill a bit. You know, we didn't have that many members, but in the 90s and into the 10s, it started to pick up. And with COVID, I don't know what's happened. There's been a huge, upsurge of interest.
There's 100 members approximately in the Flying Club at the moment, 50 of whom are students, and the other half, well, probably 35, 40 of them would be active license holders, and then there'd be a few life members who are no longer flying or who are still members but not active flying members. We have one young student here who's not even 17 yet, and he started last July, and he's targeted to have his license by the summer because he wants to go flying commercially when he does his leaving cert in September. So he did his first solo flight here about 3-4 weeks ago. As one of the youngest that we've had in a long, long time.
The people that will stay with it want to stay with it. It's the passion, it's the drug. And in my own case, I had to go away from it for some years because you got married or you bought a house and a mortgage and children and education, and there was time I just couldn't afford it. I had to stop, but I knew I wasn't going to stop. I was going to come back, but I had to wait till I got the money back.
It's a unique hobby. I'll admit it's not a cheap hobby, but in terms of affordability. If you're interested enough, you can make it. So, I mean, it costs about between 10 and 11,000 to do your pilot's license at the moment. Spread that over 2 years. And if you're fortunate, you've got a reasonably good job and you're working away and save. Yeah, I didn't drink when I was starting flying, so all my money went into flying.
Lots of people have interest in flying. You know, that it's kind of an exotic thing. You think, you know, flying. You know, you go in a big jet and you think that's fantastic. It's completely different in a light aircraft. You feel every little movement of the aircraft. You're watching the countryside go by.
Disease, addiction, whatever. I can't explain it properly to you. It's just got into the blood as a kid, and all I ever wanted to do was that.
If it's in your blood, you'll fly. If it's not, you won't.
Whatever the image might be of flying, I don't know what it is like out there, but if they think it's some sort of an elite sport, I mean, you have everybody here from every possible walk of life with no money at all, some money to obviously well-off people, and in between.
The door is always open as long as you're reasonably healthy, and it's a good way to stay healthy because you got to do medicals every 5 years when you're younger, and then when you get to my age, you have to do it every year, and keep you on your game. If
you start flying, you never give up. The only reason you give up flying is if your health comes at you. Again, there's 2 people getting presented on Saturday for 50 years flying. We have other people, you know, the 35 to 40 years. So there's a huge, as I say, fellowship in flying. And what I like also is anyone is welcome, everyone is welcome.
I'm retired, so come a good day like this, and if there's nothing else on and there's no grandchildren hanging out of me, I'm coming out here and go somewhere. I like to go places.
With the career I had in accountancy and practice, and there were times in the last 20 years things got very stressful with the economy and all the rest. I used to come out here and just get in a plane and go off for half an hour to an hour, and you learn to leave absolutely everything on the ground when you get into an airplane. You do not bring stress and trouble with you.
Fantastic sense of freedom, yeah, fabulous. Yeah. Once you get up there, whatever bad is on your mind, you're fighting with the wife, or you're worrying about something, or everything goes. I can't explain that properly to you. And you might only be up for half an hour, which is not long, but it's all gone.
I think it's in my blood. I think from the time I was 9 or 10, I always wanted to fly. I you know, as I say, I used to watch aircraft. I used to build aircraft.
It just gives me a buzz. As I said, I've liked aircraft and aviation for 50, 60 years, and while some people like to go playing golf and others like to go to the horses, I like aircraft. Up and away.